During World War II, the ruthless Nazis attacked and conquered Norway. Hundreds of civilians were killed, cities were destroyed, and other atrocities were committed. They also pillaged the country's valuable resources, strengthening themselves even further. As a result, with each passing day, the Allies felt increasing pressure, knowing that they could be next. Following that, we are transported to 1943. The Royal British Army is training a group of Norwegian men in Scotland. The plan is to form a special force capable of infiltrating occupied Norway and destroying German strongholds such as military bases and airports. 12 men are chosen after weeks of rigorous training. They are transported by ship, complete with all necessary arrangements. However, only one returns at the end of the mission. All of his friends were brutally murdered. The scene then shifts back 3 months to when the 12 men were attacked. The Germans tracked them down and destroyed their ship. 11 of them are apprehended right away, but the last one, Jan Balesrud, manages to flee. Soon after, he makes a break for it, and the Germans notice him. They fire several bullets at him, one of which hits Jan in the toe. There is soon blood everywhere, and the Germans follow it to find the fugitive. Jan, on the other hand, manages to flee. He arrives near a lake at night after hours of running. The temperature is below zero. Jan is well aware that he could die from a cardiac arrest. However, because the Germans are approaching, he decides to take the risk. Jan gradually swims away from the freezing cold water. The Germans arrive seconds later with torches and flare guns. They search the entire area but come up empty-handed. Hence, the general concludes that Jan has died inside the lake and departs with his men. Kurt Stage, a superior Nazi officer, arrives later to inspect the 12 Norwegian soldiers. When he discovers only 11, he questions the general, who claims that the 12th one died inside a lake. Kurt, on the other hand, will not believe it until he discovers a body. As a result, he orders his men to search the entire area for the 12th man. Jan emerges from the lake, but his condition has deteriorated significantly. His face and other body parts have been iced over. Despite this, Jan continues on his journey until he encounters a couple of locals. Fortunately, the two turn out to be nice people, and they immediately accompany Jan to their house. They provide him with food and warm clothing, as well as treat his wounds. Jan is extremely fortunate to be alive, because if he had stayed in the snow for a few more hours, he would have died of hypothermia. Kurt, on the other hand, interrogates the 11 men for information about their plans, but no one says anything. As a result, he severely punishes them and even executes some of them. Kurt is also determined to find the 12th man, but first he wants to see if crossing the freezing lake is even possible. Kurt himself volunteers and immerses himself in the freezing lake. He sits there for 20 minutes before concluding that one can definitely survive in this lake. Meanwhile, after Jan recovers, he sets out to assist his friends. A kind local helps him row across the lake and provides him with supplies. Jan, who has no idea where he is, stumbles upon a cottage inhabited by an elderly lady. After a while of chatting, the two become fast friends. The elderly lady even treats his feet and gives him the contact information for someone who can assist him. Jan thanks her and departs after a while. He's back in the cold wilderness, where nothing but snow can be seen for as far as the eye can see. Jan, on the other hand, keeps walking in the hopes of seeing his friends again. That evening, he arrives at the address given to him by the old lady. The house is inhabited by a couple and their adoring daughter. Jan's story is told, and the three immediately welcome him home and feed him well. Jan receives some bad news from his wife one day. She mentions that one of her friends works as a nurse at the local hospital. Several of Jan's friends have been kept in the same hospital. They have been mistreated and beaten to the point where some have gone insane and others have died. Hearing this, Jan bursts into tears and decides to abandon his plan to save his friends. Instead, he wishes to travel to neutral Sweden, where the Germans cannot harm him. Kurt shoots all of the Norwegians when he is unable to extract any information from them. Later, one of the officers approaches him and informs him that they searched all of the houses in the area but were unable to locate the 12th man. He then asks that the search activities be stopped and declares that all 12 of the Norwegian soldiers were killed. Kurt, who claims he doesn't want to lie to Hitler, declines. As instructed by the earlier family, Jan is now at the home of a fisherman. The fisherman takes him as far as he can in his boat. They had an enjoyable discussion about the state of the nation's affairs on the way there. The fisherman then pulls a newspaper from his pocket and displays an item about Kurt Stage. Kurt is revealed to be one of the most ferocious Nazi generals who has garnered multiple awards for valor. He has a history of finding and capturing every prisoner he has pursued. Kurt is currently looking for Jan and is treating the situation seriously. The boat finally reaches the shore in the subsequent scene. Before leaving, the fisherman gives Jan some food, water, and even a set of skis. Jan then straps his skis on his feet and resumes his journey. Before reaching a little settlement, he passes through thick forests and tall hills. Kurt is one of the few Germans in the neighborhood, which is unfortunate. Jan trips and falls as he tries to get past them. Kurt soon approaches him and stares menacingly into his eyes. The Norwegian appears to be apprehended, but Kurt simply makes fun of his skiing abilities and lets him go. However, after a few minutes, Kurt realizes that the skier could be the fugitive they are looking for. As a result, he orders his men to call for backup right away. A Luftwaffe plane is dispatched shortly after, and it immediately tracks January. The plane then fires several rounds of bullets, none of which hit their intended target. Just then, a massive avalanche hits, and despite his best efforts to flee, Jan is buried in the snow. As a result, the aircraft departs. Jan emerges from the snow after several hours. He is in a terrible condition, his face is bleeding profusely due to severe frostbite, his nails have fallen off, and his eyes have been injured. At first glance, it appears that a zombie has emerged from the snow. Despite this, Jan manages to get out of bed. His body may be bruised and battered, but his inner strength is stronger than ever. As a result, he moves slowly through the white wasteland, hoping to find assistance. Kurt, on the other hand, learns about the avalanche but remains convinced that Jan is still alive. As a result, he forwards some soldiers to the location. Jan is long gone by this point, but his belongings have been left behind. The soldiers discover his clothes, a map, and a pair of skis. When Kurt learns of this, he launches a massive manhunt to apprehend the fugitive. The soldiers go door to door, asking every family in the neighborhood if they have seen January. They also threaten to kill anyone caught assisting the perpetrator. Meanwhile, a lifeless Jan manages to reach a nearby village, where he is immediately assisted by a brother-sister duo, Marius and Gudrun. They treat his wounds, provide him with warm clothing, and find him a place to hide because the Germans are constantly patrolling the region. Jan has recovered some of his strength after a demanding week and is prepared to leave. However, the siblings and a few other residents load him into a sledge and deliver him to a nearby cottage because he is unable to walk due to severe frostbite. Jan will have to stay there alone for a few days before being picked up. The first few days pass without incident, but then he begins to have nightmares. Jan often finds himself getting captured by the Germans in his dreams. He also starts to dance to lovely music. When he checks his feet one day, he discovers that the majority of his digits have gangrene. Jan makes the difficult decision to act since she understands that the cancer will spread if it is not treated quickly. He grabs a knife and cuts part of his infected fingers, which makes him incredibly uncomfortable. However, his life is saved as a result of this choice. Marius finally arrives with his troop after 9 arduous days, and he awakens January. They put him on a sledge and begin to tow him uphill together. When they reach the next checkpoint, they conceal him beneath a huge rock. Before departing, Marius assures Jan that a man will soon pick him up and take him to Sweden over the border. Sadly, nobody shows up even after waiting for several hours. The temperature dips to well below -20 degrees as day fades into night. Jan is visibly trembling, and it seems as though he will pass away at any moment. The next scene shows Marius and Gudrun debating whether Jan has already crossed the border while they are at home. A man suddenly comes up to them nervously. He is the same individual who was slated to pick up Jan on January 4th. When the siblings ask what happened, the man says he looked all over the mountain but couldn't find Jan. This is when Marius realizes he and his group have mistakenly abandoned Jan on the wrong mountain. He rushes to the mentioned location with one of his friends and digs Jan out of the deep snow. The latter appears to be lifeless at first, but he soon begins to move. Jan has survived despite being deprived of food and water for several days while submerged in thick snow. Marius feeds him some hot soup and begs him to stay for a few more hours. A group of men arrives quickly with sledges and drags him away. They travel for hours through the desolate terrain, but because Jan has become significantly weak, they decide to seek refuge inside a cave. Jan is enraged by the idea, fearing that the Germans will catch up with them. He is also concerned that he will endanger the lives of these men. However, the sledge group's leader assures him that they are safe. Following that, the group begins to look after January. They also cut off the infected parts of his feet on a regular basis to prevent the gangrene from spreading. After 6 days, the group decides to leave when Jan regains some of his health. This time, they enlist the assistance of thousands of reindeer because there is a German outpost near the border. The plan is to crowd the area so that Jan is overlooked. After a while, the entire group departs, and Jan is loaded onto a sled drawn by the herd's alpha reindeer. They quickly approach the border, causing the Germans to be on high alert. They quickly take out their binoculars and search for Jan, but they can't find him in the crowd. The group's plan appears to be working until the ropes holding Jan's sledge snap, resulting in a painful accident. The Germans notice him as well and immediately begin firing, but Jan manages to hide behind a rock with the last of his strength. It's only a matter of time before he's discovered. So, with no other options, Jan pulls out his gun and prepares to commit the unthinkable. However, the alpha reindeer approaches him just as he is about to do so. Jan's desire to live is rekindled, so he drops his gun and begins tying the rope around his hands. Then he fires his gun into the sky, startling the reindeer so much that it bolts with all its might. They fly right past the Germans, dodging all of their bullets. Then a miracle occurs. Jan is successfully transported across the border to Sweden by reindeer. Jan is overjoyed and begins screaming like a lunatic, while the Germans are concerned because they have no jurisdiction on the other side. They immediately call Kurt and inform him of the situation, and he cannot believe he has failed for the first time in his life. Jan returned to Scotland 3 months later. His physical injuries have mostly healed, but the mental trauma has not. During a military function, he limped slowly towards his general and hands him his report. Jan is regarded as a hero for evading the Nazis and retrieving information that proved crucial in the liberation of Norway. The war ended in 1945, and Kurt Stage was executed in 1947 for his role in atrocities. Marius married and had 5 children, while Gudrun lived happily with her boyfriend. Jan received several bravery awards, but he credits all the brave men, women, and reindeer who assisted him during the 63 days of hell. Jan lived a long and peaceful life in Norway with his family until his death in 1988. The movie ends here. Please like and subscribe to my channel.